It's no secret that drones have been the key to almost every success Ukraine has enjoyed against Russia. It's primarily thanks to drones that Ukraine decimated a third of Russia's Black Sea fleet. It's with drones that Ukraine has launched repeated deep strikes into Russia's territory, whittling away at Vladimir Putin's war machine in the process. And now, Ukraine's drone situation is being supercharged. Ukraine just went full beast mode with a 900% surge in its drone arsenal. Putin is quivering in his boots. If he thought Ukraine's drones were hurting Russia before, he's not ready for what comes next as Ukraine ramps up. On July 7, Defense Express reported on the findings of a study conducted jointly by Georgetown Security Studies Review and the Atlantic Council think tanks. That study dug deep into Ukraine's drone production capabilities to discover that the country is now building 900% more drones than it was in 2024. Last year, Ukraine was making about 20,000 unmanned aerial vehicles per month by the summer of 2024, giving it an approximate annual total of 240,000 drones. In 2025, monthly numbers have rocketed up to more than 200,000 per month. In a single month of 2025, Ukraine is building as many drones as it did for the entire year of 2024. If it keeps up this pace, that'll mean that there are more than 2.4 million drones in Ukraine's arsenal by the time 2025 is through. Right now, Defense Express says, Ukraine finds itself in an interesting position. Around 200,000 drones per month is its new baseline, and a number that Ukraine's current manufacturing capacity seems capable of supporting. But things can grow from here. A country that's already entered beast mode on the drone front has the potential to shoot its production to the moon if it can secure two things: long-term drone production mechanisms and more investment into new drone technologies. On the long-term front, intellectual property protection will be vital. That's according to United 24 Media, which says the joint report highlighted that many of Ukraine's drones aren't patented. There are caveats to this problem. For one, the report only covers data about drone patents from between 2022 and 2023. Back then, Ukraine's domestic drone production was still in its early stages, so it's likely that many of its drones have since been patented. Second, a lack of patenting may be deliberate. After all, patent documents reveal the secrets behind a product. They have to, if those secrets are going to be legally protected. Ukraine may have a policy in place to avoid patenting as much as it can before the Ukraine war ends, so that Russia can't get its hands on documents revealing how Ukraine's drones are built. Regardless, patents will end up being vital for boosting Ukrainian production, especially if it starts working with its allies to build its drones. More on that in a moment. Another reason why patents may prove important to any Ukrainian attempt to scale up beyond the already impressive 900% boost seen in 2025 is production. Specifically, the standardization of production to ensure all of Ukraine's drones meet specific quality standards to ensure they're capable of doing what they need to do when used against Russia. Rather than just issuing guidelines, the focus should be on enforcing compliance to ensure reliability across drone models, a challenge especially relevant in a wartime context where speed often overrides quality control, United 24 says. Though patents aren't the only mechanism for ensuring this standardization over the long term, they certainly help. With patents, Ukraine demonstrates precisely how to build its drones, which is useful for both domestic manufacturers and external partners who may help in the future. Failing patents, standard operating procedures for manufacture could be produced and are perhaps easier to protect from public scrutiny while the war is ongoing. Then there's the money issue. That's where previous mentions of Ukraine working alongside its allies to build drones come into play. Domestically, Ukraine creating long-term contracts with its drone manufacturers would be extremely beneficial when it comes to ramping up drone production even further. As RBC Ukraine points out, these contracts would allow manufacturers to make decisions as they relate to hiring talent, planning production runs, and searching for future investment. Stability would be the result. And with stability, which can only come from long-term contracts, those manufacturers could focus solely on building their drones without having to worry about how they're going to afford to keep the lights on. Now, beyond domestic production, Ukraine also has opportunities to link up with drone manufacturers overseas. That's huge. With overseas production comes even more stability. After all, Ukraine's domestic drone manufacturers are obvious targets for Putin. Russia's leader may start launching his missiles and drones at their factories to try and slow Ukraine down. That isn't an option when Ukraine is also having its drones built in other countries. Unless Putin wants to start direct wars with Ukraine's partners, this approach would secure another through line for Ukraine's drone productions so that it can really build upon its 900% surge. Ukraine knows this, and that's why it's already working hard to form partnerships. On July 7, Aviation Week reported that Ukraine has partnered with a secretive drone company that's being launched by the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. Its report comes on the back of others suggesting that Ukraine had a new US-based drone partner, with Aviation Week now able to offer more details. It says that Ukraine believes the new US company already has the capacity to deliver hundreds of thousands of drones to Ukraine before the end of 2025, with production likely to scale significantly in 2026. As for Schmidt's company, it's called Swift Beat LLC, and it was registered as a business in August 2023. Schmidt appears to have been planning a partnership like this for some time. The drones his company can deliver include interceptor drones, which can shoot down Russia's missiles and drones, along with reconnaissance, targeting, logistics, and quadcopter unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. The latter of which are key to Ukraine's offensive efforts, as they can typically carry explosive payloads. Aviation Week also says that something called medium-class strike drones are also part of the agreement Ukraine has signed with Swift Beat. What those drones are and how Ukraine plans to use them isn't clear yet. And it gets better. The announcement of the Swift Beat deal came just days after Ukraine and Denmark signed a military production deal. Under that deal, Ukraine's defense companies will be able to open manufacturing facilities on Danish soil. Remember the problem of Putin bombing Ukraine's factories mentioned earlier? This is one potential solution to that problem. Under the terms of the new deal, Ukraine will use its Danish factories to build weapons, including drones, that are then shipped back into Ukraine for the use of its armed forces. Ukraine's Strategic Industries Minister, Herman Smetanyk, was quick to hail the groundbreaking deal. Writing on Facebook, he said, "A year ago, Denmark became the first country to fund weapon production by Ukrainian manufacturers. Today, it's become the first country to which Ukraine exports its own defense technologies for production, scaling, and supply to the Ukrainian army." Smetanyk added that this new deal is a landmark in terms of Ukraine's defense cooperation, stating, "This is a unique case of international cooperation for the Ukrainian defense industry. I am extremely grateful to Denmark for such significant assistance to the Ukrainian defense industry, for timely decisions and support at a high level of defense cooperation." There's more. On July 3rd, the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine has also signed a deal with the UK for the production of Raybird drones. Ukraine's Skyton will work alongside the UK company Prevail Solutions to build the drones, which were designed by the Ukrainian company and have already developed a reputation in the Ukraine war. Collectively, Skyton's Raybirds have logged 350,000 flight hours and have been responsible for billions of dollars of damages to Russia's forces. With the UK now helping to build those drones, one can expect to see an influx of new Raybirds entering the war soon. What's apparent here is Ukraine handling even more of the long-term aspects of its drone production, while also keeping an eye on future investment. After all, think about what these deals mean for the future, especially those signed with Denmark and the UK. In both cases, these countries will be able to gain a better understanding of Ukraine's drones, meaning they'll see what those drones are capable of achieving. Investment could follow. Denmark and the UK might invest in building some of these drones for themselves, as well as Ukraine, which means more money being pumped into Ukraine's war chest. Money Ukraine can use to further build on its already impressive drone production capabilities. Ukraine's 900% boost to drone production also isn't isolated. Instead, it's just one aspect of a Ukrainian defense industry that's been booming ever since Putin invaded. In February, Militani reported that the production capacity of that defense industry has increased by 75%. It also quoted Smetanyk, who points out what this means in monetary terms. The capabilities of the Ukrainian defense industry have grown 35 times over the 3 years of the invasion, from $1 billion in 2022 to $35 billion in 2025, Smetanine said. The only problem Ukraine faces in this area is that its production capabilities don't match its procurement abilities. As Militani notes, Ukraine spent $9 billion of its own funds, along with $1.5 billion of foreign investment on domestic weapons in 2024. Assuming the same level of investment for 2025 means that Ukraine would only be using about a third of its manufacturing capacity. Again, the external investment arguments made earlier come into play. The more agreements Ukraine can sign with its partners, the more potential there is for money to come flowing in. Ukraine is already producing drones in massive numbers. Patenting and licensing those drones out to other countries could create a revenue stream that allows Ukraine to truly keep up with the growth of its defense industry. That would be a game changer for the Ukraine war. After all, May 30 brought with it news that Ukraine's defense industry is already covering about 40% of the Ukrainian armed forces' needs. The only reason the number isn't higher is that Ukraine needs to start generating more money to support and invest in that industry. Drones could be the key. If Ukraine can monetize its drones better after going into beast mode with their production, it delivers a 1-2 combo to Putin. More drones attacking Russian troops as more money pours into Ukraine's growing defense sector. But while all of this is great news for Ukraine, it's also hard to ignore something important. Russia is ramping up its drone production as well. On June 27, the Moscow Times reported on the findings of a think tank named the Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting, or CMASF. That generic name is something of a smokescreen. The CMASF is associated with the Kremlin, meaning the data it produces should be taken with a grain of salt. Still, the think tank says that Russian drone production is on the rise. In May 2025, Russia built about 17% more drones than it did the previous month. For the first 5 months of 2025, Russia's drone production has risen by an average of 3.7%, with the main numbers representing a record high. This supposed growth comes in the wake of Putin stating that the 1.5 million drones Russia reportedly made in 2024 were insufficient for Russia's military operations. While CMASF numbers should be taken with a grain of salt, a report from the Kyiv Post at least demonstrates that Putin is serious about Russia's drone ambitions. The outlet says that there is a Russian company named Aerohit that has built a vast network of Chinese partners. Through those partners, it's acquiring around 10,000 drones per month, amounting to about 120,000 per year that are being used in Ukraine. Combine these sorts of deals with Russia's domestic drone manufacturing, and it's clear that Putin is mirroring Ukraine's strategy of building more drones. It wouldn't be accurate to say that Ukraine going into beast mode for its drone production is a direct response to these Russian moves. It isn't. Ukraine would be trying to build as many drones as it can, given that UAVs are one of its strongest weapons against Putin. Still, one can't ignore the fact that Russia is scaling up drone production too. With its investments, partnerships, and ever-growing domestic drone production sector, Ukraine is staying one step ahead of Russia. That's vital. Russia hits Ukraine hard with drones too, so Ukraine having more of them means it at least has one numbers advantage in a war where the numbers typically favour Putin's forces. So Ukraine's beast mode is activated. A 900% production surge means that Ukraine is building more drones than ever before, and is building partnership with its allies that pave the way for it to make even more. Here's what this means for the Ukraine war. First, there's the numbers issue touched on earlier. Since the beginning of Putin's invasion, Ukraine has faced a manpower disadvantage. That hasn't changed, despite the massive casualties Ukraine has inflicted on Russia. In June, Russia's losses of soldiers to death, injury or capture exceeded 1 million, according to United 24 media. At the same time, Russia is managing to mostly replenish those losses by recruiting around 30,000 contract soldiers per month. Bear in mind that Russia also hasn't fully mobilized. Doing that would amount to Putin officially declaring war on Ukraine, which he's avoided so far. He still calls this war a special military operation. But if Russia does mobilize, that's hundreds of thousands more soldiers that could come pouring into Ukraine. By contrast, Ukraine has manpower struggles. The International Institute for Strategic Studies estimated that Ukraine needs between 50,000 and 100,000 fresh troops to bolster its own depleted and war-weary forces. Those troops are proving difficult to find as Russia's numbers advantage bears down. What does any of this have to do with drones? The Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, offers a possible answer. In an April article, CSIS said the future of Ukraine's military looks simple: fewer soldiers and more drones. Speaking in the context of a future where Russia and Ukraine have agreed to a ceasefire, CSIS says, to ensure that any ceasefire becomes a lasting peace, Ukraine will have to continue substituting drones for people and invest in a mix of layered air defense and long-range conventional precision strike. This force will need a deep strategic reserve that changes how free societies think about their reserve component and national service. Maybe this is the strategy Ukraine is following with its supercharged drone production. Only, instead of preparing for an eventual ceasefire, it's making more drones so it can replace as many of the soldiers it's lost in the war as it can. Ukraine is in this for the long haul. Putin is showing no signs of wanting to end this war until he has what he wants. So, Ukraine is building more drones, both to develop an even greater threat to Russia and perhaps to alleviate its own manpower issues. After all, Russia's manpower advantage is one of Putin's greatest assets. If Ukraine can use drones to overcome that advantage, it may find a pathway to winning the war. And speaking about causing damage to Russia, Ukraine will be able to do plenty more of that when it's building so many drones. On the basic battlefield front, drones are now responsible for up to 80% of the casualties caused in the Ukraine war. For Russia, that means that about 800 of the approximately 1,000 soldiers it's losing per day are dying or being injured thanks to Ukraine's UAVs. That's according to Army Technology, and those are numbers that Ukraine will be happy to see. The logic becomes simple: build more drones, inflict more casualties. If Ukraine can manage to do that while reducing its own casualty rate in the face of its manpower issues, that's a double win. Ukraine has also been using its drones to strike deep into Russian territory. Though there are many examples of this on the long-range strike front, perhaps the most impressive example comes from June's Operation Spiderweb. Ukraine managed to sneak over 100 of its quadcopter first-person view drones into Russia, using trucks before unleashing those drones on several Russian air bases. The result was the destruction of around $7 billion worth of Russian equipment, NBC News says, including key Russian bombers and spy planes. If Ukraine intends to carry out more operations like these in the future, it's going to need more drones. The goal is to cause as much damage to Russia as possible. With drones now Ukraine's chief weapon for doing that, it stands to reason that it has supercharged production and has plans to build even more than what it's now making thanks to its 900% surge. And then there's the elephant in the room to consider: the United States. It's fair to say that Ukraine's relationship with the US has been tumultuous since Donald Trump began his second term as president. Twice already, Trump has halted military aid to Ukraine, with the most recent example coming in July. Military aid has resumed as of July 8, as Trump seems to be realizing that Putin is lying to him about his supposed intention to work toward a ceasefire. Still, Ukraine can't ignore the fact that the US has pulled aid twice already. Naturally, it has to ask itself what it will do if that aid is pulled again, especially if a temporary pause becomes a permanent pause. That's where Ukraine's massive drone production, along with the growth of its domestic defense industry, comes into play. Ukraine doesn't want to make itself independent from the US. It would much rather have the US as a partner in its defense against Putin's invading forces. However, it also needs to prepare for the possibility that this partner will choose to leave Ukraine to fend for itself. A 900% increase in drone production helps to alleviate the pressure that would result. So do the drone production partnerships Ukraine is signing with its European allies, as well as its business dealings with Swift Beat in the US, which seems to be independent of governmental aid. None of this was meant to happen. Putin thought he would steamroll Ukraine, and even when that plan failed, he thought Ukraine would fight until its allies decided they'd grown tired of supporting it. Now he's dealing with a Ukraine that has a resurgent defense industry and is building more drones than ever before. That 900% surge in drone production can only mean one thing for Putin's troops: thousands more casualties. And as Ukraine is boosting its drone production, creating the potential for a massive influx of foreign investment, it's also cutting off Putin's financial lifeline. Ukraine is destroying the last thing that is keeping Russia alive, the Shadow Fleet. Discover more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in the Ukraine war.